Today, we're diving deep into the fascinating world of probiotics and the vital role they play in our overall health and healthy aging. The term probiotics might make you think of yogurts or maybe even those fancy refrigerated supplements at the health food store. But did you know that the history of probiotics in the United States goes way back before they became mainstream? Today, we're going to explore that history along with the incredible science of how these friendly bacteria work in harmony with our bodies. We'll also dive into the amazing world of the gut microbiome. That's the diverse community of trillions of microorganisms living in our digestive tract. It's an ecosystem that's so complex and so crucial that some scientists call it a second brain. We'll learn how it influences not just our digestion, but our immune system, our mood, our skin health, and yes, even our aging process. To help us navigate this subject, we'll be joined by the mother of probiotics, who has dedicated her career and her life to studying these microscopic allies. She shares the latest research on how nurturing our gut health can lead to improved physical and mental wellness and contribute to a vibrant, active lifestyle as we age. So, whether you're a longtime probiotics enthusiast or you're just curious about why health gurus keep recommending yogurt, this episode is packed with information that you won't want to miss. Hello and welcome to the Over 50 Health and Wellness Show. I'm your host, Kevin English. I'm the founder of The Silver Edge, and our mission is to help you build and maintain a lean, healthy body that you love for the rest of your life, so that you can show up in the second half of your life as the healthiest, strongest, most vital version of yourself. We have a great show for you today. Natasha Trenev is here, and she's going to help us navigate the fascinating world of probiotics and gut health. But before we get to that, I want to let you know that this episode is brought to you by The Silver Edge. The Silver Edge is my online nutrition, exercise, and lifestyle coaching business, catering to those of you over 50 who aren't ready to give up and buy into the common narrative of it's all downhill from here. At The Silver Edge, we take a health-first approach to working with our clients to help them build lean, strong, vital bodies that last. Look, there's no shortage of lose weight quick coaches and programs out there in the world, but here's the deal. You can either lose weight quickly or permanently. So if you're tired of losing and gaining the same weight over and over again, if you're tired of constantly dieting, if you have a poor relationship with food, exercise, and your body, then I invite you to book a call and see if our services are a good fit for you. The easiest way to do this is to head over to silveredgefitness.com and click on the coaching tab, or just shoot me an email at coach@silveredgefitness.com. Okay, enough of that. Let's get on with today's show. My guest today is Natasha Trenev. Natasha is known as the mother of probiotics, and, as you'll soon hear, she has significantly contributed to the evolution of the probiotic industry as we know it today. Natasha is the founder and president of Trenev, which is her probiotic and supplement company, and today she shares her lifetime of experience in researching probiotics and their impact on gut health. Without further ado, let's meet Natasha.
I've been in this field for 56 years. I started while I was still in high school at UCLA, helping my father's business, actually my family business. We introduced the concept of natural style Bulgarian yogurt and liquid acidophilus to North America. And we were the first ones to actually sell a honey flavored fruit at the bottom. And we did a lot of innovative things. I set the liquid yogurt standard with the state of California in 1969. I helped to set the kefir standard for the state of New York in the late 1970s. And I've been involved in starter cultures and probiotic cultures all my life. I've worked with the University of Nebraska, had an exclusive license to represent their research at the end of 1970s. I worked with Dr. Marvin Speck at North Carolina, esteemed physicians at Cedar-Sinai, Dr. Calvin Hobel for 25 years, and obstetrics and gynecology, giving grand rounds at UCLA gastroenterology department, working with the head of gastroenterology at Yale, working with a fellow at Stanford to do a Lyme disease study, and working with the head of the World Gastroenterologist Association, Dr. Julio Bai from Argentina, where we did 2 clinical trials on celiac disease. So I have an extensive background. I work with the best in the field of microbiology and established many of the standards for probiotics. One of my standards was writing to congressional record. So I know probiotics from the research and formulation side to the actual fermentation and production to the actual education and marketing. I'm also the author of 3 books, one published by Penguin Putnam and the other published by HarperCollins. So I'm a noted author in the field of the publications.
Yeah, so you are the right person for us to talk to when it comes to all things probiotic, right? And so I want to back up a little bit and kind of set the stage. Most people have a general idea of what probiotics are, but you had started out by saying, "Hey, I brought probiotics to the United States in this." I think you talked about formulation with some yogurt. You mentioned
Mhm.
kefirs. You mentioned cultures. Talk to us a little bit about where do probiotics come from?
Well, probiotics come from nature. They're usually found in the fields, and they were actually several species that evolved with us as Homo sapiens. And they were transferred very successfully for thousands of years from a healthy mother to a healthy child. That unfortunately has been disrupted very severely in westernized cultures where we've introduced hundreds of chemicals in the air, in the water, and in the food. And that disruption has led to a chronic disease state where we have 80% of chronic disease as part of our healthcare package, which is at $4.3 trillion today. So we have a problem. First of all, most doctors are not educated about the digestive tract. They only understand bacteria from the point of that they can cause disease. They really don't understand what the microbiome is versus the microbiota and how these organisms need to be introduced if they're going to have a beneficial effect on the host, which is you and me.
Okay, so once upon a time, then we evolved with these probiotics, right? So we co-evolved. It's a symbiotic relationship, and it makes for a healthy, not just a healthy gut, but a healthy human. Once upon a time, we would have transferred that mother to child, and that would have been a very natural process. But what you're saying, what I hear you saying is now in our modern Western culture, with all of these, I suppose, toxins pretty much everywhere, it's unavoidable. That has been disrupted. Is that right? And what's happening? Why is that? What specifically is happening? Is it killing off the good bacteria,
Yeah. Well,
or
there's no number of reasons, and that would take another hour but just to give it to you in a executive summary, only about 7% of mothers in North America are able to transfer the right probiotic bacteria called Bifidobacteria infantis to their child, even if the child is born vaginally and breastfed. And that was been going on for the last several decades. And in fact, in the late 1970s, I started warning people. They didn't even know what I was talking about. They didn't even know what bifidobacteria were. So obviously it was totally ignored. So moving fast forward, it's the use of chemicals like glyphosate in the weed killer that is actually was registered as a potent antibiotic first, and then used as a weed killer in about over 209 chemicals found in processed foods today. So that's just, top of the line. So we know why the mothers are not passing on these healthy bacteria. There's always, researchers that say that the rise of autism, which is now 1 in 30 children and going to 1 in 2 children by 2030, is the result of unhealthy parents on both sides having gut issues for several generations as being one of the primary causes of the susceptibility of the child to become autistic. So, all of these questions require a great deal of explanation, but just trust me, I've been on top of that. And unfortunately, most of the information I have brought has fallen on deaf ears. And therefore, my desire that at my age, I'm going to be doing all these podcasts to educate people of all ages and the importance of knowing that our immune system is lodged in that 27 feet of GI tract. And if that immune system doesn't have friendly support system to make it function optimally, we're in big trouble.
Okay, so we've got this very dire situation then where our gut health is rapidly, rapidly deteriorating. It sounds like we're not able to pass on a healthy gut to our babies. And like you said, the state of chronic disease it's an emergency as it is now, and it's getting worse, it sounds like. So what then is the solution?
Well, the solution is to know, unfortunately, the word probiotics is bantered around without people really understanding. My criteria is you have to choose the bacteria that has been in the literature at least for 100 years, that we know is an absolute safe and beneficial bacteria for the human host, and that it's made in the proper way so that it can survive manufacturing, storage, shipping, stomach acid, and bile to do any good for us. And all of us see is pretty packaging and a lot of promises and products sitting on the shelf, which are totally worthless. And they're having to use stronger and stronger bacteria to get them to survive the adverse handling procedures so that the end user gets some kind of effect. But they're not really truly getting a probiotic effect, because the objective of a true probiotic is to help to improve the ecosystem in the 27 feet of your GI tract, which houses approximately 100 trillion microbes. It's not the job to treat symptoms or to cure disease. It's to fix an ecosystem that will allow the body to heal itself.
Okay, and I think a lot of people miss the fact, because you're right, probiotics are a pretty popular supplement. You can get them at grocery stores, drugstores, you can buy them online. And I think people miss the fact that these are living organisms, right? And they have to be manufactured in a way and then transported, warehoused, shipped, stored, put on a shelf, eventually get to us, right, the consumer, and still be a live living organism that will then go into the gut and colonize. And it's my understanding that when we say probiotics, what we're saying is basically the good bugs, right? We want to
Yes.
there's organisms in that 27 feet of gut tract that you're talking about, but what are we trying to do? Are we trying to balance? Are we trying to get what is it about probiotics in the gut that make a healthy gut and then in turn make a healthy human?
Right. In other words, there's three objectives. One is to replenish the right bacteria in the small intestine, the large intestine, and the transient flora. Now, most people don't know that 40% of your dry fecal matter is bacteria. As we age, we become a less desirable environment for them to thrive. And the objective of every microbe, they're very smart, probably a lot smarter than we are, is to thrive. If if the situation is not optimal for them to thrive, they vacate that territory and look for more beneficial territories. It's as simple as that. So, and then the other group of microorganisms are there, and they can churn on us if they're allowed to overgrow. They're okay while they're kept in check. And we do ingest a lot of them through our food because, let's face it, none of our food is sterile. And the bacteria come in with the food, whether they're pesticide laden or they're organic. There's still microbes that come into the food, and most people don't know the proper sanitary procedures to prepare the food that we're going to ingest. And even if you're buying frozen or store-bought foods, there's still what we call the background noise. And because of our abuse of antibiotics, we now have dozens potentially disease-causing bacteria that are resistant to every known antibiotic. And that can be picked up on your steering wheel, and the counter of your supermarket, anywhere, especially in gym where people perspire a lot and leave a lot of these bugs everywhere. So, it's our lack of understanding, our what I call our microwave decades of people not understanding how food is made, how food should be ingested, and how we keep an optimal balance in our gut to help our bodies thrive and not be prone to chronic disease.
So when we talk about how to prepare food, and I suppose that if all we need to do is look back a few generations ago, I suspect the more the more traditional ways of preparing food are going to be the healthy ways of preparing food. Because
Mhm.
I think I read a statistic that 90% of food in a grocery store didn't even exist 100 years ago. It's not even food, it's a food-like substance. So we've introduced all of these hyper palatable, ultra processed foods into our diet that are not our ancestral foods. What are some things that we can do at home when it comes to maybe food selection, preparation in order to help bolster our gut health?
Yeah. Well, first of all, learn that how to prepare food. If you're not buying a food in a box, it's how to keep your kitchen clean. Just, don't come in and wash your hands in the sink that you prepare food in because you're bringing all this bacteria in. Second of all, learn how to wash your fruits and vegetables correctly, either with distilled white vinegar or even with baking soda. Anywhere online, you can find the proportions, or at my website, you can find some information on preparing food properly. Stop eating foods just to fill your tummy. I avoid any fast foods. I avoid any packaged foods because I know the nutrients are dead there. And they're usually filled with salt or sugar because once the food is processed, that's about the only thing your palate can pick up. And so people have not been taught how to get vegetables and fruits to taste delicious. It's good we've learned about organic, but I'm going to go to the French model. When they're making fresh foods, they make every ingredient count. In other words, every ingredient has to have its own flavor, its unique addition to the food. And it causes a rethinking on our part. And that's what we need to do because the cultures that I've studied for the last 50 years were cultures where people had this preparation of food and they had a healthy style of preparing foods. And no, they did not eat a lot of raw foods. And this is another misconception that most of our digestive tracts are no longer capable of eating all those raw foods. And that's why a lot of young women have a bloating problem because they don't have the proper enzymes to digest those raw foods that they're eating. And number two, the other biggest problem is that people that run out to the juice bars and have no idea that those juice bars need to be broken down every hour and the machine sanitized. Because once you break down a fruit or a vegetable, it becomes an attraction site for all the bacteria that are floating in the air. And that machine will become infected. And now you're getting maybe healthy vegetables and fruits, but you're also getting a huge load of what we call a background microorganisms that can cause diarrhea, that can cause problems in your health. And most people need to understand this.
Okay, so it sounds to me like our first tip, our first takeaway today then is food preparation and sanitation. And to be honest, this isn't something I personally put a lot of thought into. I'm fortunate that I've got a rather large garden. I get a lot of my vegetables and some fruits from there. And my thinking is, well, I grew them. They're on my property. They're from my compost, from my animals. And they come in, they get a light rinse, and boom, they get eaten. And I suppose that's probably better than them being picked in, say, Northern California and then
Yeah.
Central California and shipped across the United States, all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
But I rarely do more than a cursory. I'm basically only rinsing so there any bugs that might be in there are rinsed out. So having that clean and sterile environment, I am aware that you can make vinegar and vinegar water spray for your fruits and vegetables to clean them with. So cleaning our food, having a clean environment is one way to get to start to improve our gut health. What about fermenting foods? What's the role of that? And that's again something that's kind of lost. We don't typically, most of
Yeah.
us aren't
And just to
fermenting.
answer your question, even though it's coming from your clean garden, it probably has a lot of soil bacteria. So you
It probably
still, even
does.
if it
Yeah.
comes from your own garden, you better, wash it with distilled vinegar or with baking soda, because that's what makes it organic, is it's
Right.
got a lot of bacteria on it.
Right.
And so even if it comes from your own garden, you need to wash it.
Got it. Yeah, no,
Well,
I've already got something on my checklist here that I'm going to change
okay.
as a result of this. All right. So, yeah, I want to talk to you about fermenting. I think that's a bit
Okay.
of
Yeah.
a lost art there. What is the role of fermenting? What happens when we ferment
Okay.
things?
Well,
And
fermenting food is breaking down the food so it's easier for your body to utilize the components in the fermented food. My biggest concern is that generationally, we don't understand starter cultures. people are selling starter cultures that really don't know enough about them. And people are fermenting stuff at home that literally gives me nightmares because, again, the lack of sanitation, not understanding what makes a starter culture, whether you're fermenting vegetables or yogurt. People just take the so-called seller's advice, and you don't even know who the seller is, what their expertise is. We more or less know in America about yeast for bread making. We're more assured about that, but any kind of vegetable fermentation, I think there's several generations that we've lost the understanding on how to ferment vegetables at home correctly, or what even a starter culture is.
So, talk to us a little bit. What is a starter culture? When people hear you say starter culture, what are you referring to?
Well, there are specific bacteria. So let's talk about yogurt. Yogurt has a starter culture that has a standard with the USDA and the FDA. And so in order for a product to be called a yogurt, it has to be fermented with Lactobacillus bulgaricus and Streptococcus thermophilus. You should not be buying a starter culture that has thrown in all these bacteria. They're not adding to the culturing process, and they're probably going to die because that's not the medium that they're designed to survive it. So people get confused and some manufacturers throw stuff on the label because the uneducated view that as a better starter culture because it's got all this bacteria name. No, it's actually interfering with the process because these two bacteria have formed a rare symbiosis, and they're there to make sure that they break down the milk and make the protein into amino acids and peptides that is much easier for your body to absorb and use. And there's a little bit left of the microorganisms, which was great when we did have all these challenges in our society, but no longer enough for the kind of challenges we have with chronic illness in our society.
All right. We have this very specific culture and culturing process, and that's for
Yeah.
dairy, for specifically for yogurt in that case. We had talked a little bit about, I think probably most of us can remember our parents, or perhaps we have a practice, or our grandparents certainly
Yeah.
would pickle vegetables or they would ferment vegetables. What is there a culturing process there? Is that more of a, that's a,
There is a culturing process, but I'm not an expert on culturing vegetables. But I just know in the old country, they used to use salt. When they used to make sour cabbage, they would use salt in a proportion, and they would close the cabbage in a barrel in order to sour the cabbage. And I think salt was used to ferment other vegetables as well. Or when women were used to do candy, and remember they used to sterilize the jars. My
yeah.
mother used to do that, God bless her. They knew the process because they learned from their mother, and their mother learned from her mother, and so forth. And it's really a very precise process. And again, sanitation and knowing the rules is very important, which I think a lot of people in our society have completely been divorced from.
Yes, we've outsourced the feeding of ourselves to basically to big business. We've done
Right.
it, I suppose, for a number of reasons, as more and more of us are now in urban environments. And it seems like big food companies now are responsible for the care and feeding of us primarily. So we have this a rather bleak outlook. We've lost this generational knowledge to prepare food that would be healthy for our gut. We've got all these environmental toxins, which are also drastically degrading our gut health.
Yeah.
What then is the answer? I obviously we started talking about probiotics. Can I take a quality probiotic and be healthy, or what's the protocol? What can we do?
Yes. Okay. So I've spent my life doing this, and I've actually started selling a yogurt starter culture because people were driving me crazy trying to use the other organisms that I was selling as a supplement. It should only be sold as a supplement to try to make a fermented food and getting themselves into trouble. So I do have a yogurt making video on our website, which I'm happy to share. And, I make the yogurt from milk because historically, whether you're making it from cow's milk, mare's milk, yak milk, those type of yogurts are fermented by these two bacteria. And regardless of what substance you use, you have to use these two bacteria in order to call it a yogurt. That makes sense?
Yep.
So I show you how to make the yogurt from cow's milk because that's the traditional way. The other bacteria that I chose, because as I said, I've been in this field for well over 56 years, is the bacteria any bacteria that's been in the literature for 100 or more years, I feel is a safe bacteria to make and introduce to the individual. So Lactobacillus acidophilus was the first organism my family introduced as a supplemental culture, and that I introduced as the first probiotic product in North America in 1982. There was no such a thing as a freeze-dried acidophilus powder that was ever introduced besides by me in 1982. In fact, in the 1970s, I was the first one to introduce a freeze-dried culture of kefir grains. That was another thing that my family introduced. And Altadena used to make the kefir, and my family used to supply the starter culture. Hence why New York State asked me to come out and help them set the standard. So I'm digressing here. So every bacteria I've chosen is the one that I know was safely and effectively used for human beings. Now, the Lactobacillus acidophilus that I introduced is something we call the facultative anaerobe. What does that mean? It means it likes to live both in oxygenated and non-oxygenated areas in your GI tract. Your small intestine happens to be one of those areas, and it's an essential organism to help with absorbing and digesting vitamins and minerals and other nutrients and making it available to the body in the right proportion so that it doesn't upset the immune cells as the nourishment is passing the intestinal wall. And it also establishes a unique communication system with all the 80% of the immune cells that line the 27 feet of GI tract. And the small intestine is about 20 feet long. And if you spread it out, it would cover a tennis court. So there's a lot of area here on the small intestine where this communication is going on. And how did they communicate? By photon light emission. So they're communicating with the immune system because now they have this bacteria has a vested interest to keep you healthy, the host, because it loves to thrive in your small intestine. Does that make sense to you?
It does.
So if you have a question about the small intestine, I'd like to get to the large intestine.
No, let's move to the large intestine.
Okay. So again, I was the first person in North America to introduce bifidobacteria, which there's a number of species, and I chose the species by, doing diligent research from either Japanese or German sources, which were very prolific in their understanding of this bifidobacteria. Now, the bifidobacteria loves to live in our large intestine, which the colon is part of our large intestine. And it's a place where there's no oxygen. So it's called an obligate anaerobe. And why is this bacteria so important to health? Because there's the rest of the immune function there, and that's our waste and disposal system. So the finalization of our absorption process takes place in the large intestine, and the disposal of waste has to be done in a timely fashion so that the body is able to extract all the nourishment it can from the food we consume and get it out of the body before it turns into a toxic substance that our body starts reabsorbing. And that's in a very simplistic explanation. And if this is done efficiently, then it takes the burden off of our liver, which is responsible for utilizing or neutralizing all of these toxins that maybe then reabsorbed into our body and cause harm.
Gotcha. Okay. So obviously our digestive tract is a vastly, vastly complex system.
Right.
And I think that people now, the word microbiome is thrown around quite a bit. People are familiar with terms like prebiotic, probiotic, even postbiotic.
I'm going to get to all of that and why we need to really understand this, because, really our health and the welfare of our body belongs in this sense. Even our mental and our skin health, all of it is related to what's going on in the gut. Now, when you talk about the microbiome, because I worked with the Microbiome Trust in 2012 when they were first coming out with this word, what the word actually means is the sum total of the genetic material of the 100 trillion microbes that line that GI tract. There's about 238 million genes with these bacteria that live in our gut, and we as humans only have 22,000. So understanding those bacteria and their genes is very important to our overall health. And it still requires a lot of study. I think there's a lot of studies published, But again, it's using the pharma model to treat a certain symptom. And that's not the function of the microbiome or the microbiota. The microbiota then in turn are the 100 trillion microbes that line the GI tract from your mouth to the other end. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. So we're trying to create a harmonious combination here where everything is done to protect us, the human host, which we destroy by our ignorance and acceptance of what we call easy living at the detriment of our body's health, both mental and physical.
Yeah. So do you want to talk a little bit more then about the gut's role in basically whole body health? It seems like the gut's having its moment now. I've heard the gut referred to as a second brain. I've heard the gut
Mhm.
talked about associated with memory and with skin health. You just mentioned with skin health. Is it because that we just have these symbiotic bugs in us that when we're healthy, they're healthy, and vice versa? That translates to more energy or
Yeah,
better
yeah. Well,
skin.
let me get to that aspect. Okay. So and I'm trying to keep it very simple. So I hope none of your listeners
No,
getting
I
sick of it.
appreciate that. Yeah, no.
Yeah. There are very complex subjects and a lot
Right.
of people throw in fancy terminology, but my purpose here is to facilitate better understanding for your listeners and in that respect help them understand how to keep themselves healthy. So, the second brain was a concept that was brought out in the 1990s by a fellow from Colombia that published his book called The Second Brain. And he didn't really implicate probiotics as a necessary source. He just established that there's a separate nervous system called the enteric nervous system that's connected to the vagus nerve that directly communicates with our first brain. And you don't want anything from that enteric nervous system coming up to our first brain because those signals are usually not too good if they're messed with. So the second brain, is in our gut with that enteric nervous system. And about 90% of your serotonin and about 50% of your dopamine is produced in the GI tract. And if it's done effectively and correctly, it's then at a measured amounts sent up to our first brain via the vagus nerve. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
And the microbes also stimulate the production of GABA and tryptophan, among other beneficial chemicals that is necessary for a healthy brain function. When there's a disruption in the GI tract, and we've known this can even cause violence because of drop in the glycemic factor. And there's a very famous case that utilized this defense. It's called the Hostess Twinkie defense. And that's when, that the very famous supervisor, Harvey Milk, was shot by a person who went berserk. And his defense was that they used a number of Scandinavian studies to show that, imbalances in violent behavior can be triggered by, consuming too many simple sugars and causing a huge fluctuation in the glycemic index. So these are just two examples of why stuff that's going on in your gut can cause bad behavior, depression, anxiety. It's sort of a loop. Your perception of reality is changed, and that perception of reality then causes certain chemicals to not be produced in your GI tract, and that flow of those necessary chemicals to keep you healthy is disrupted. So it's a loop. So if you can't change your perception of reality fast enough, then you have to do more supplementation to help your gut produce those chemicals to help your first brain function better.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, we keep coming back to this fact that a healthy gut is critical for a healthy human, for mental health, for emotional health, as well
Yep.
as this physiological health. So I want to keep coming back then to what can we do, just those of us that are new to this subject. And obviously we talked about, okay, first things first, let's make sure we're upping our game in hygiene.
Right.
We're cleaning our fruits, vegetables, and eating real whole foods. Is it a good idea for us to be eating a good amount of cultured food,
Yeah,
fermented
I call
foods,
that functional food.
functional foods?
Functional
Yeah.
food is good because it means that the essential nutrients are broken down to a observable size before you ingest them.
Hmm.
which is going to help you just, create the energy that you need. Unfortunately, as I've always told people, I don't make the rules. We've destroyed our infrastructure, with our food production, our stress level, the pollutants in our air, in our water that are everywhere. So we now have to use the correct probiotic supplementation to try to keep that optimal balance in the GI tract until we can bring the conditions that a majority of us are investing our time and energy to bringing back healthy consumption of bread, wheat, other carbohydrate that used to be staples in our diet and not harmful to us.
Okay, so here's $1 million question for you. You had just mentioned you're working to bring back this healthier environment for us, this eating environment. Are you optimistic that we can turn this around?
Absolutely. Our body is rebuilt every year. Your 50 trillion cells that make your body, this unique, incredible biological machine, is replaced. Every cell in your body is replaced every year. So if your body's making cheap proteins because it doesn't have the right digestive process and the right food, you or will get a disease. It's, been scientifically validated for decades. So if you're not able to replace these cells that you're losing every year, by the way, that's what causes aging as well, then you're not rebuilding your body because your body's being rebuilt every day. There's only one cell depth of lining in your whole GI tract. And depending on the individual, that's replaced every 3 to 5 days. Your skin cells are replaced every 3 to 5 months. Okay. So your whole body, you have a chance to rebuild your whole body. Every year you have that chance. You're given that opportunity. What you do with that opportunity really resides in you. It's your mental and your physical health. And, I tell people stop being stressed out during meals, go back to the habit of sharing your meals with a loved one, sit down, put away that electronic device, and make sure you get the right probiotic supplementation. Don't be seduced with people selling you all these products with 6, 8, 20 strains and huge numbers that they're telling you about. Number one, none of those individuals knows anything about those organisms they're selling you because they're buying it from somebody else and just blending the material and based on some research that they read. That's not how you formulate a probiotic product. You have to meet the criteria of the bacteria. You have to make sure that the bacteria is evolved with the human being and that it will go to an area in the GI tract and not compete with other beneficial bacteria, which is defeating the purpose of taking the probiotic supplement in the first place. So once we understand that simplistic thing, all of these choices become very easy for us to make because now we're armed with the information and how to make that choice. Does that make sense?
It does. And I love that you brought up the eating mindfully. I think that's another part of our just Western culture that we've gotten away from. It seems like we are a culture that idolizes that go, go, go mentality. So many of us are eating on the run. We rarely sit down with that, that traditional family meal. And to your point, a lot of us were on our electronic devices while we're eating. We're eating in cars. We're eating at our
Yeah.
office desks. And it's just not conducive, I suppose, to this healthy digestion, this healthy gut that we're trying to get to.
No, because digestion begins in the mouth. And if you're
Mhm.
gulping down food and you're not chewing each bite 10 times, it doesn't give your body really enough help to process the food properly.
All right. So I just want to go back then again, because you mentioned that you were hopeful, that you're optimistic about our health. And it sounds like what you're saying is we as individuals can take control of our health. We can make healthy decisions. We can instill healthy habits and improve our health. And because our bodies are constantly regenerating, there's some optimism there. What about for just our infrastructure, our environment that we live in? We know that our soils are being depleted, and we've just talked about all the toxins that are everywhere. Do you feel like this is our new reality and we're going to have to adapt with things like specifically more and more supplementation? Or do you feel like we can turn the tide there and kind of wind that back, what is your thinking on that?
I think we're going to need the proper supplementation. I think there's been greed and misinformation on every level. And I feel that anything that can be spoiled can be fixed. I think our desire to work in the community, I tell people work in the community, start talking to your neighbors, start talking to people in your community, start making the change on a local basis because it's not going to be from top down. It's going to be from bottom up.
Mm.
Start being an example of, what it is. Enjoy your meals like the French and the Italians do. Sit down with a friend, laugh, you know, make that a part of your day. You're detached socially, which is a very bad thing in our culture. The machines have become our friends and bedfellows. We're really not friends with many people, and we don't have a way of sitting down and sharing. This all makes a difference on whether you're a good host to these beneficial bacteria, because they don't want to stay around if you're always in a nasty mood, because when you're in a nasty mood, you're producing nasty chemicals, not only bad for yourself, but bad for the beneficial bacteria. And they say, hey, we don't want to stay in this neighborhood. We want to leave. And that's why I'm saying that I didn't make the rules. I didn't make the conditions. All I can do is offer you the supplementation that I feel is right. And that's why I'm still working at 75, because I feel I've lost a lot of generations who are now seduced with simplistic answers to very complex issues and are listening to people who are there and they have part of the education, but they don't see the whole 180 degrees, which we need to see, and maybe the 360 degrees, where we have to readjust our whole thinking and our concept of, our neighborhoods, our local living, of how we interact with each other, and get back to a whole style of living healthy.
Well, I 100% agree with you, and that's why I like projects like podcasts and more long form content. You had mentioned that we're we tend to seek out these simplistic sound bites or
Yeah.
simplistic answers to vastly complex issues, and I love these longer, more nuanced conversations where we can start to unpack some of this. Unfortunately, it seems like with our social media mindset where everything is a meme, everything is consumed in 30-second chunklets, we're moving away from that, not towards that, I feel like. But like you, I do have hope that we can affect change, healthy change.
Yeah.
And I like you, I agree that it starts with us, right? With you and I.
Yeah,
It's gonna
just
start
being
from the bottom
interested.
up, right?
Yeah, just being interested in other people. What I'm telling you is that the reason for our chronic illness is not only our food and the fact that we're killing these microbes because we no longer become a good habitat for them, but we're killing ourselves with these chronic illnesses. They're
Mm.
all the cause of the changes that we've made that are not in the best aspect of our healthy living. That we have to look at cultures where people were happy. All these people with the machines, by and large, the young people I've seen, they're not very happy. That's why you have increase in addiction. In our neighborhood here, I've seen since the COVID strike, 300% increase in addiction, where parents are paying $20 to $88,000 a month to get their kids off of either pharmaceutical drugs or recreational drugs. It's horrific. The young people are depressed. They don't know why they're depressed. They don't feel part of the community. They don't feel loved. And it's a huge problem. And I think we need to face it, because just with the autistic cases, by 2030, 1 in 2 children will be diagnosed as in the spectrum of autism, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, that is alarming, and I 100% agree with you. I often get asked as a nutrition coach, what's the best diet for longevity? And of course, people will roll out the Mediterranean, but what they're missing there is, yeah, I mean, those people are eating healthy, whole foods. But I think more to your point, there are these lifestyle factors that are involved there that contribute greatly to their longevity as well, which is more of that culture. It's more of that social and interactions and not being in isolation, not being addicted to electronics. And I think that staying connected with other human beings is absolutely vital for certainly for our emotional and social health, but just for our whole body physiological health as well. And it seems like you've given us some pretty solid information on why that might be, just even from a gut level. You're right. When constantly chronically stressed and my cortisol's constantly up, why would why would the good bugs want to stick around in that environment, right?
Now you become a trashy environment, and as
Right.
I said, they're a lot smarter than we are. They
Huh.
just leave, you
Yeah.
know. And that's why I told people I don't make the rules. I'm just telling you what they are, and I'm trying to do my best to still deliver the products that I know are correct because I've been in this industry for so long. I've sat on standards committees for 10 years or more, and I've seen the industry completely deny the fact that whenever tested, 80% of the dietary supplements don't meet the ingredients on their label. It's not that the concepts don't work, it's that the products we're consuming and that we're seduced in buying that really don't meet their label declaration.
Yeah, and we go back to the unregulated supplement market. It really is the wild, wild west, and so buyer beware. You just have to do your research. So, Natasha, that's I mean that's a perfect segue for us here. You have a long, long history working specifically in this field. You have a company, a supplement company. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and how people might
Yeah,
find that?
yeah. The company is Natren, Matren. You can go on our website, but I still have live people who have been with me 10, 15, 20 years who stay with the company because we feel proud that we're still offering a service and people that call in, we can customize your probiotic intake. And I can assure you that for 40 years, we're still the leaders. There's nothing out there like us. And I do want good competition. I want everybody to understand this is not about just selling a product. I understand the health challenges we have in our country and that we have globally. I want good competition. I want to set the bar so that people come up with their own products that follow that bar, that follow the labeling standard that was read into congressional record, that are really interested in selling a product that is rocket science and requires rocket science dedication to make sure that the people get it. So if you want to talk to a live person and you don't want to just buy on the website, I'd like to give that number. It's 866, the number 4, and you spell out the word matren, matren.com. I get regularly asked questions to Ask Natasha. I'm still happy I'm able to provide that. And I want to assure you that I'm an old fashioned health food aficionado. I didn't go into this business with a business plan. In fact, I had none. My whole concept of when I went into this is I realized there was, even in the 1980s, a need for this product. And unfortunately, watching decade after decade, more and more products proliferate the market, not just in probiotics, but in every category, but our population getting sicker, not getting better.
Yeah.
And I said, and I challenged my colleagues and I said to them, 70 years of health food concepts, why don't we have less chronic disease? And why don't we have a healthier population? Because everybody wants that 2-minute bite by somebody they deem to be an expert. And they really don't know somebody who's dedicated their life to a product category that knows it inside out, that is dedicated to produce a product that delivers results that really benefits the end user. That's what I think we have to get back to as a society, not just, enhancing our local culture, but getting back to a society by people who are really producing products that know what they're talking about, have a commitment to make the best, and are there to service their clients and make sure that they are getting the best.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you. And just to put things in perspective, folks, any one of us right now listening to this could go out, could source any supplement materials. You could outsource somebody to make labels, to package and send you, and you could be in the supplement industry. You could be selling supplements within a month. It's
Yep.
the bar is ridiculously low in order to get into this market. So when Natasha says she's been doing this basically her entire life, certainly that should give us all reason to pay attention when she talks about this. So folks, Natasha had mentioned her website and ways you might get in touch with her, as well as that phone number. I'll put all of that into the show notes. You
Mhm.
guys can find that there. I certainly encourage you to reach out and take advantage of her knowledge, her products, whatever you need. Natasha, I want to just thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all of your wisdom and your knowledge with us, but really for a lifetime of service to this and dedication to the human race. I think that's very admirable. The world needs more of what you have to offer, and I just wish you all the best in all your future endeavors.
Yeah, thank you. All it takes is, in the old days, all it takes is one person of sincere intent to talk to another person, and we clean up the industry very quickly.
Let's do it.
Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you for the time, and thank you for all the listeners. And I'm here happy to help in any way I can.
Okay, that's our show for today, folks. If you've enjoyed this podcast, I want to let you know that we have other free resources over at silveredgefree.com. There you'll find our free guides with our top tips on nutrition, exercise, and healthy lifestyle to assist you in your weight loss and fitness journey. So feel free to head over there and download anything that looks useful to you. I'll put links to everything we talked about in the show notes, and you can find those over at silveredgefitness.com/206. As we wrap up our time together today, you can show your support for this show in two important ways. The first is to tell a friend about this podcast and encourage them to give it a listen. The second is for you YouTube folks to click the like and subscribe buttons, and for you podcast folks to consider giving this podcast a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on, and be sure to subscribe and follow so you don't miss any future episodes. I really appreciate you spending your time with me today, and until next time, stay strong.